me see here. If you could, so here we are, test number 2, geometry, statistics, and home finance. So for our study sheet, I'm guessing I'm just gonna briefly just go over it. See? Right. We're doing the yellow exam booklet and the study sheet guideline. So home finance is going to be the heaviest on it. Maybe again here, mortgages is going to be almost a guarantee that there's something related to mortgages, right? And for mortgages, it's basically the same thing as loans when we did the vehicle finance. And I'll zoom into just this section here so you can write down. The payment is going to be the purchase price minus a down payment. You take a table rate, you divide it by 1,000, right? Remember that table rate only shows up here. That's it. You don't use it ever again in any other formulas or calculations. Also, there may not be a down payment, right? So some students were a bit caught off guard when you did the first test. Students were wondering, like, what about the down payment, right? Well, it's not always there, right? So the formula, you need to be able to shrink it down as needed, right? About 10, 15 years ago, there was a time where you could buy a house with 0 down. Okay, so there was a time where that was they would let you do that. So that's for your payment. Then the other one would be the total interest, which is basically, how should I do this? I'll try to stick with the same. You take your payment, you multiply that by 12 months and by the number of years, and you subtract the mortgage from it, right? And what is your mortgage, you may ask? Well, let's do this here. This part right here, if you subtract that, that is what you need to take. The bank needs to provide that, right? The rest, so that's what we call our mortgage. So that comes back here. What do we call this part right here? Any brave volunteers? This part right here, what would we call that? Sorry? The loan is, this is the loan, like mortgage is this, but this part right here, total paid to the bank. Because think about it, you made this payment times 12 times the many years, right? So this is total paid to bank. I'm just going to go total paid bank, right? So you understand what each part of the formula is. You can then, you have to read the question carefully. Some of you just read the word total. Okay, it's total, right? So you just, it must be TI, right? It's like, no, is it total paid to the bank? Is it total interest paid? What is it, right? And that's that. Interest, which is just the first month. It's your mortgage times the interest rate divided by 100. So the interest rate would have to be as a percentage. So let's say it's 3%. You go 3 divided by 100 to get 0.03, right? And all of that divided by 12. So this is, I will write this down. First month interest. It's actually the formula for finding the interest for every single month, right? If you do your amortization tables. This is pretty much all you need for mortgages. And then knowing that a payment is always equal to the principal plus the interest. And this is the lowercase interest, right, we're talking about. So technically, if you figure out the interest, you can subtract it from the payment to get the principal portion of that payment. So if you deal with anything related to mortgages, right, and there a table needs to be provided to figure out the payment. But if they give you the payment, then it's a different story. You don't need to do this, right, because you already know what the payment is. Maybe I'll talk about GDSR, right? You need the payment, heat, property tax, and income should all be in monthly amounts. Sorry, I'm going to go over. So the GDSR, the payment, the heat, property, everything needs to be monthly. So if it says annual or yearly, you need to divide that by 12, right? So you have to make sure all four of them are monthly amounts. If the GDSR, you have to be able to answer the question. If it's greater than 32%, not approved. Anything under 32 will be approved, right? If it's 32% exactly, you are still approved. If it's 32.01, technically you're above it, so you will not be approved. So, yeah, look that up. If there's a GDSR question, then the formula is on the formula sheet and it's also in your notes, right? Property taxes. Okay. There's the portioned assessment times the mill rate. And that mill rate is always divided by 1,000. So if they give you various mill rates, yeah. Oh, sorry. This part right here. This is a plus. This is a plus. Yeah. Gross debt service ratio. It's in your booklet. If you go to GDSR, it's called the gross debt service ratio. Normally, a question on an exam or test will just ask you to calculate the GDSR for this family or for the person interested in buying, right? So property tax, they will most likely give you the portion assessment. If it's not there, if they give you the entire value of the house, they will indicate that you need to multiply it by 45%. And that would be the portion assessment, the taxable portion. You multiply it by the mill rate. So if there are multiple mill rates, right? You keep doing that, PA times mill rate. Sometimes there's only one mill rate, then this would only happen once, right? And then you have to look at improvements. So you would add that when you multiply the portion assessment times the mill rate, you would add the improvements, and then you're looking for any credits that may show up. So you go add everything up minus credits, right? That's your total. It'll be a dollar amount, right? So again, this is very briefly just reviewing. I'm not saying this is it. This is just a refresh, and you might have to go back in your notes and see how we did questions that involved property taxes. Yeah. Yeah, well, these tests that you're writing, you're not going to see them again because they're like exams, right? You're only going to get your marks, yeah. Your class, I'm pretty much done already. This class, I just need to upload and everything, but I most likely will do both at the same time. You'll get a report with your final, everything in. Land transfer tax. Right? I call that LTT. You need to be able to do those, right? Instead of going through an example here, I'm just gonna ask you to go see your notes. But the chart will be provided. You know how I gave you like different tiers, right? Where the first 30,000 would be 0%, right? This will be provided. So you don't need to memorize that, right? So the chart will be provided. You don't have to worry about that. We have that. Land transfer tax, property tax, GDSR mortgages. So that's in terms of calculating. When it comes to additional costs of ownership, you need to be able to answer I think I'm just gonna say, right, that the one-time category would consist of, for sure, land transfer tax. You should know that. One time would also be, what do I have in here? Decorating. If you have to pay for any installs, right? Any installations like transferring over a shop from one house to the other, or MTS or whatever, that would be considered a one-time cost. Your lawyer fees, right? Your survey, right? Property survey, where they make sure that your property is actually within the boundaries. And all those, so you have to have at least 2 one-time costs ready to go here. And then ongoing. For ongoing costs, right? Obviously, you have your property taxes. You keep on paying that, and insurance, right? Your utilities, and so forth. This is what is not cool when you answer these types of questions. Don't be too general, too broad. You know what I mean? Like maintenance. That's too broad. Like you have to, like you can say maintenance, and then, for example, replacing the furnace filters, right? Or something that's small, like specific, don't be too generic, because then you need to have there should be evidence that you took the course, right? So that the province would normally not allow. Okay. And then maybe one last here, emergency versus preventative. And so the idea is you perform preventative maintenance, right, to avoid costly emergency repairs, right? So replacing furnace filters regularly. So every filter has like a certain lifetime, sometimes 3 months. Oh, you can see that, right? So replacing furnace filters, and you would say replacing furnace, right? That would be the emergency repair that goes with that. If you weren't on top of this, you'd probably face that, right? You could say preventative would be clean gutters, right? Clean the gutters or the eaves troughs, and what it would prevent is re-roof house or replace the roof on the house, right? Because if you don't do this, it would create a major breakdown that would be a lot more costly, right? So that's kind of the idea between preventative and emergency. Okay? Yeah. Technically, yes. Because that could prevent, right? If there's a fire and you're notified, there's a chance that you can call and save a lot, right? Yeah. Lives and damage to the house. You could talk about, yeah, there's lots in the book if you just go through it that I actually specifically mentioned some of them. So just watch out for that. I think saving energy, all of that, I did talk about that, and actually in the home finance test it was done fairly well. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Okay. So that's for home finance. Then we go to stats, statistics. You need to know your mean, median, mode, and range. And remember these ones. Remember that this would be your median, right? Make sure your median is always in the middle. And then I asked you, it's like, hey, using numbers 1 to 20, fill in so that your average is this and your mode is this, median is that. So go look that up in your books. If there are even numbers, yeah, then you need to take the average of the two middle. Yeah, so add them up divided by 2. Yeah. But I'm just making reference to that. If this shows up, then you should know, because that tells me that you understand mean, median, mode. Range is just the largest minus the smallest number. Percentile rank, remember to percentage next to the PR answer. That is not right. Percentile rank, you should not have that. Okay, so let's scratch that part. You should have no percent next to answer. That's what it should say there. Percentile rank, you should never have a percent at the end. Okay, so let's go PR here. Percentile rank. Let me zoom out a bit. Percentile rank, it tells you the percentage of values that are lower than the one considered. So they can talk about height, they can talk about time that you spend driving to work, it can talk about height of plants, you name it, right? And so you're trying to figure out how many values lie below the one you're interested in. So how many people are shorter than 5 feet 2 inches, right? So you'd actually count that. So we'll do some examples. I won't go into detail there. And then weighted mean, there's repetition versus final score. Final score, you basically just multiply each category by the weight, and then you get your final score there. Repetition, you needed to find out which number to divide by, right? Because you'll be giving a chart, and you have to figure out like which of these two am I gonna divide by. So I will go over that hopefully. And then trimmed mean, right? You have to be able to identify the outliers and then calculate the trimmed mean. The important thing about trimmed mean, remove equal number of values from both ends. Right? That was the important thing about trimmed mean. You have to be able to explain why the trimmed mean might be a better choice in certain scenarios, and it usually is like gets rid of the outlier, right? Outlier or outliers. That's the important thing about trim mean. So if you have like, monthly income, you make like 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 2,000, right? All of a sudden you have like a $5,000 income a month. I don't know, you work lots of overtime. We would not want to include that in our average because it's so far from everything else. So we want to get rid of it. So we also trim the lowest income to make that choice, right? Working backwards, right? Mean is given, need to figure out what is needed to achieve that mean. So just look for backwards examples in your book. And that's that. So, you know what? I have some room, so I will do this. Let's box this in, percentile rank, trimmed mean. I will try to give a weighted mean example here. Right? So let's say you have times, like the time it took you to drive and how many people responded with that time frame, right? So let's say it's 5 minutes. Let's say this is all in minutes. So 5 minutes, 7 minutes, and 10 minutes. And so you had 3 people saying that it takes them 5 minutes to drive to work. You had 12 people saying that it took 7 minutes. And you had 8 people saying it took 10 minutes to drive to work. Right? What would be the average time to drive to work? If that's what the question is asking you, how would you do that? Let me zoom in just a little bit so you can write that down. So 5, 7, 10, 3, 12, 28. So this is what, you know what? You can score 1 mark for sure if you do this. 5 times 3, right? 5 times 3, 7 times 12. You got to add every time you multiply, plus 10 times 8. So this is obviously a small, like a short little question. So you add every row, sorry, you multiply every row and then you add those results up. And then you have to divide by a certain number. And notice what the question is saying. The average time to drive to work, right? So because it's saying time, we want time at the top. And this is question mark, right? So because time is supposed to stay we want to divide by the number of people. So we're going to go 3 plus 12 plus 8. Okay. So basically, whatever it's referring to, it's like if it said the average people, right, then that would not be how you want to proceed. But it says the average time, so that makes sure you want time left at the top. So therefore, you divide by people down here. And so this will be 15 plus 84, right, plus 80 divided by 23. And this is 164, 179, right, divided by 23. Sorry there. And that is 7.78 minutes per person, basically. So every employee spends about, or person in this survey spends about 7.78 minutes on average driving to work. Okay. Let me go back up here. I think this is probably better. What are you doing in the top the whole time? You're going time times people, right? So you want time to be left. So you would therefore add your people up at the bottom, so to cancel, because that's how what really is happening here. We're canceling out the number of people and leaving you with time, right? So that's the idea there. That's one way of doing it. The other way is choose one of these columns. One number will not make sense, right? Because the time, if you think about it, the time should be within these numbers. It shouldn't be past that, right? Because the greatest time is 10 minutes, so you can't have a time bigger than 10 minutes as your average driving time. Okay, let's dive into our booklets now. So let's grab that yellow booklet, spend some time working through those questions. So watch this. Home finance is right at the beginning, page 1. And then it'll have a bunch of, oh yeah, the home insurance I didn't talk about in the pink, but that's okay. That's why you're reviewing. So there are 6 questions on home finance. Then you got to kind of skip towards the end to get the statistics, page 35. So let's for now just start with home finance. I'll let you work on your own a little bit. And then I will take over and do a bunch of questions with you. Or would you like me to do the yellow booklet and then you do the other 2 by yourselves? What's your preference? You want to do it? Okay, all right. I'm okay with it. I just want you to do well on it, right? Okay, so home finance, let's dive right in. Average monthly heating cost for Wrong's house is $265. Calculate his total expected heating cost for 4 years, right? So to get the total here, it's almost like you get your monthly payment, except for this is for heating, and it's monthly, right? So we go times 12 months times 4 years. So it's basically times 48. Right? 265 times 48, 12,720. It's actually quite a bit if you think about it, and that's not exaggerating, right? So that's that, 12,720 for heating. Just one mark there, so you weren't expecting a whole lot more at that time. And then it says B's. This is going to try to make a point as to, you know, how much you can save in energy costs, right? In this case, heating. The heating cost will be reduced by 35% If wrong, installs heated floors. Calculate his total expected heating cost for 4 years with heated floors. So this is getting a little trickier here. So what we're going to need to do is, I will just go like this, 265. I will multiply that by 35%, which is 0.35. Okay. So I go 265 times 0.35 because that's 35% of 265. So I'm saving $92.75 per month in savings. But they don't want the savings, they want the total heating costs, right, over 4 years. So I'm going to go minus 92.75. Like I'm going to take the 265 and just subtract. So his new heating cost now is, monthly speaking, right, is $172.25. Right, this is the new heating cost. Right, so we're going to multiply that by 12 months. We're going to multiply that by 4 years. So I'm going to leave that on my calculator, go times 12, go times 4. So it's now 8,268. That's how much his heating cost would be now. I know I did it a bit longer. This is a longer way of doing it, in my opinion. So you say, or, because we have some time, I'll do this. Or, what was my heating cost up in A, right? In A, we had 12,720 in 4 years, right? So what you could have done is just multiply that whole thing by 0.35. So that would mean that you saved this much over 4 years. So then you just take that number and subtract it. And you get the same amount. Clearly indicate your final answer, okay? Don't just leave a bunch of numbers. So this is how much your heating cost over 4 years. So 2 ways of getting to the answer. Just kind of, follow your train of thought and show your steps, and that'll be. So this question would have given you 1 mark for figuring out this, and then 1 more mark for figuring out the actual heating cost, not just the savings. Okay, next. 4 marks for this page. What at the top right corner? We're talking insurance here. Stella purchases a house in Winnipeg, valued at $215,000. She buys comprehensive. I'm going to underline the important terms, right? Comprehensive. It's in Winnipeg. We know that the value is that. And it's a house, right? I should add that. It's a house. It's in Winnipeg. This is how much it's valued. We want comprehensive and a $500 deductible. Calculate her annual premium before taxes. Refer to the table on the following page. We'll do that in a bit, but I want you to make sure you have this formula on your study sheet, right? Anybody have this formula written down that I gave you? I might be a little off. You have it, Joey? Can you? Okay. Okay. Square brackets, right? And then it's times 1.10 times 1.07. This is if you want a $200 deductible. And this is taxes, right? Zoom out a bit. So this is the formula that covers every single case. We are getting a $500 deductible, so we're going to scratch that. And it says before taxes, so we're going to scratch the taxes, right? So no need to do this and no need to do that. So we're down to just basically what the square brackets are showing us. And so let's go ahead and solve this. Table rate. I'm going to go over to my table, which is on the next page here. We are in Winnipeg. We want comprehensive, right? And you look at the value of the homes on the left side here. So you know you're going to max out, right? 200,000 down here. So you need to write the 771 down and also bring this with you because we're going over, right? This house is worth 215. So let's remember both of these, 771 and 350, right at the bottom there. So I'll do this, 771 plus, I will already do this part here because it's easier, 350 over 1,000. And then I need to figure out how much I'm over by. So I will do this on the side, 215,000 minus 200,000, because this 771 covers $200,000 already. So this is my overage. This is how much I'm going over by compared to the table, right? This 15 grand, and that's what goes in here. And this is, when I marked the test, this was done very well, but coming up with your number after this was not done very well. And I suspect that it's because you're trying to punch in everything in one shot and you're not using brackets carefully. So please do this. Write this number down, do this first, and then add them up. Don't do it in one shot. That's dangerous. Right, so I go 350 times 15,000, and then I divide it by 1,000. So 5,250 is how much I have to pay extra to make sure I have insurance for everything for the whole 215,000. So that's 823. I don't need the square brackets anymore, sorry. 823.5 on my calculator, and I'm going to make sure I add that. This is a $500 deductible, and it's before taxes. Keep that in mind, right? If the question had said after tax, I would have had to multiply this by 1.07. Taxes are only 7% on insurance, okay? Describe one way Stella could reduce her annual insurance premium for this property. 1 mark. What's one thing you can do? And don't tell me get a cheaper house. Like that doesn't work, right? Like you're in the house, you just want to pay less for the insurance. And what you can do is install an alarm system. Don't tell me get better credit, because you can't just get a better credit overnight. You can't just do it like that. But an alarm system you can install. You just call one of the companies, right? What else can you do? You can't say, I'm just going to go up here. In this case, Stella got a comprehensive. Standard would be cheaper, right? Switch to a standard policy instead of comprehensive. I'm just being specific so that I don't lose any half marks for not being specific, right? I'm just going to leave it at that. Don't say move to a cheaper area because, right, like common sense, like you just want to, like for the house you're in, you just want to pay less. What can you do, like just by making a few phone calls or, right, talking to your insurance company? All right, question 3. Amortization tables. Those are your favorites, right? All-time favorites. And this one is actually not too bad. 3 marks. For each box, you get 1 mark. What would the payment be here? Does it change? Never changes. But just to make sure, let's say you're freezing on a test. Not because it's cold in here, just because your brain is not awake, right? It's technically the interest, which is lowercase I, and the principal, right? So if you add these two up, you should get the payment, which you are, okay? So it's these two always make up your payment. So basically these two added up gives you the payment. Therefore, if you have one of these boxes missing, just subtract here, right? So we would go minus 710, 34. So this is 323.66. And to get your unpaid balance, we just take the previous unpaid balance minus the principal, right? Because the principal takes down your unpaid balance. So we'd go 189.99.34 minus 324.88. That's 188. Always put a dollar sign next to the values just to make sure you don't lose any marks, right? You don't want to lose marks there. And because you might use this to review, I'm just going to show this work here, right? And this other one I'm going to do there. And you have then you know the steps we took to get that. Three marks. Not too bad. Next, question 4. Read carefully, okay? Albert comes from his vacation and finds his basement has flooded. Describe one maintenance task Albert could have done to reduce the risk of his basement flooding. What would you say there? Why do you think it flooded? They don't say, right? Remember the hot water tank thing? I've heard many stories. People come down to the basement, it's dark, and they step into a pool of water, like maybe 2-3 inches, right? Because the water, if the water tank rusts at the bottom, it just explodes sometimes, like it just leaks. And it just runs all night, non-stop, right? So one maintenance task is check hot water tank for corrosion or rust at the bottom. Right? That's one thing that you could have done. Just basic. You could have installed a catch basin under hot water tank. That's probably even better, right? So this is now, I'm just making the assumption that it's a hot water tank, but it could have also been because you may not have slope the ground away from your home, or the eavesdrops, right? The drops weren't like sloped away from your home. Or maybe you didn't put them down. You know how you can fold them up sometimes, right? You forgot to put them down, so the water was actually running down those side walls of your basement, right? Um, so slope. Let me rephrase that. Uh, make sure that the ground around the house slopes away from the walls, right? Or something like that. Ensure there's an appropriate drainage. Anything like that. Use your own words. Ensure proper drainage away from the home. Leaky faucets, right? Leaky faucets, sometimes they corrode, especially if you live outside the city and you have well water. Uh, it causes a lot of corrosion. So sometimes over time it will leak, your faucets will leak, and you have to make sure you replace them, right? So you could have said that, make sure there are no leaky faucets. What I do, this is what I do every time I leave my house for longer periods of time, go down to the basement, there's a main water valve, right? A main water valve coming right from your meter. I just turn that right off, right? I just be gentle, because sometimes when they're old, they want to leak too, but just slowly turn it until the water is off. And then I go somewhere in the basement, turn on the faucet and just let the pressure out, and then close it again, of course. And then you know that there's no water, right? Like exercising pressure on your water lines, and so then you don't have to worry about it. That's what I do. Okay. So even if your hot water tank breaks, here's your lesson for today. There's a main water line coming in here that has a lot of pressure, right? Obviously it fills it up. But if you cut this off, if there's no pressure coming in, sure, this will leak, right? But it's only what's in the tank. It won't be continuous. And so this water will leak, but there's a drain somewhere in your basement. It will go away, right? It won't fill up your basement. So shut down main water lines. That's another one. Maybe I will do that. Shut down main water. This is just for life, even. Like, don't worry so much about the test. For this one, I want you to know that, right? Because a lot of people don't know it. And also for insurance purposes, if you're away for like a week or two, a lot of insurance policies require a person to come in every 48 hours or so. So you got to make sure you do that, right? Ask a neighbor, ask friends to come. Just come in once to take a look, and then that's okay. But they require that. All right, question 5. Kelly's statement and demand for taxes. By the way, let's write down property taxes. We're in home finance, right? Calculate the municipal taxes and the total taxes due. So watch this. They set it all up for you, right? So the education taxes have already been calculated, right? There's a portioned assessment, which is the same. They multiplied it by the mill rate, and then they got that. So you're just supposed to find the municipal taxes here. So this is though the kicker. Watch this. So students, I remember marking this one, right? Students would just multiply this and put it down, and it's a huge number, right? 2,500,000. So you remember a mill rate, you always divide by 1,000, right? That's almost assumed that you will do that. So the answer is 2,544.74. Okay. So this is one mark right there. And then the total, they want you to know that 2544. That you're supposed to add these two, education and municipal taxes. And you subtract the credit. A credit in a bill is always like, it's very common for it to be in brackets. So we subtract the credit, and then we get our total of 4,463.22. But just so you know, this is just a simple, right, scenario. They could have made you calculate the municipal, the education separately. So just watch out for that, right? They would have given you these two mill rates. So you just go multiply portion assessment times the mill rate, this times the mill rate, right, to get your two taxes. And there are credits. In this case, there are no local improvements, right? No improvements here mentioned. Okay. So watch out. Don't think it's always going to be the case. You just have to know what needs to be done if there's a mill rate, and how do I come up with my total, right? Which is all the different taxes plus local improvement if there are any, take away any credits if they mention them, and that's your total. Last question here. This GDSR, yeah, this is GDSR. So you're calculating the GDSR for Federico, and it says monthly mortgage, that's good, monthly property tax, monthly heating, annual income. Right, you need to do something with that. So let's figure out the monthly right away. 4,125 per month. So now we have all these values in a monthly amount. Calculate the GDSR. You take the mortgage, the property tax, the heating, you divide that by the income, all of that times 100. By the way, these three here are called housing costs, right? Like if they ever refer to housing costs, it's the heating, the payment, and the property taxes combined. So we're going to go 975 plus 395 plus 110. That's 1480 divided by 4125. Don't rush on these ones. Right? 1480 divided by 4125. We multiply that by 100, and that is 35.88%. I encourage you to practice those, right? Just go find GDSR in your booklet. And if they ask, right, would not be approved, comma, since GDSR is above 32%. You have to mention why you would not be approved. Don't say, oh no, it's too much money, I don't think so. It doesn't count. It has to be, you have to make reference to this fact here. Okay. Let's go to statistics now. This is on page 35. Let's see. 1 mark. Okay, so it can't be that hard. But actually, these ones are, you have to think, right? Jorge is a soccer goalie. This year, he saved 92% of shots on net. This puts him in the 10th percentile of goalies in the league. Justify, referring to the percentile rank, whether Jorge is one of the best goalies in the league of this year. This is where you need to understand 10th percentile, what does that mean? That 10% of goalies saved fewer or less than 92% of shots. Right? Let's make this statement that the 10th percentile tells us that 10% of goalies saved less than 90%, or that's technically less than what Jorge saved. Does that mean he's done fairly well? Is he a good goalie? If only 10% of goalies did worse than him? He's not a very good goalie in particular. Because think of this way, if you were in the 99th percentile, a lot of goalies would have been below you. But he's only here. This is Jorge's at the 10th percentile, right? Only 10% of goalies did worse than him. So since only 10% of goalies did worse than Jorge, he is not one of the best this year. Sorry, Jorge. Not picking on you, but we just have to face the facts, right? That you're in the 10th percentile. So there's a lot of goalies that did better, right? 10% below. We don't know if 90%, we don't know, might have been a few that are the same as him, but a lot more did better than him. Okay, next. A train has 60 cars. Calculate the average load of one train, right? Using weighted mean based on the information in the table below. So weighted mean, folks, you take the number of trains, right, times 100 tons plus 10 times 80. Okay, go ahead and do that right away. Right? 50 train cars that weigh 100 tons, and for grain, 10 trains that weigh 80 tons. What are you going to divide it by? That's the question. So this is where I want you to go up here and say average load of a train car. So the average load. So I'll go load here. And we went ahead and always multiplied the load and the cars, right? This is what that is, right? So we went ahead and multiplied the load and the cars. So we would like to get rid of cars because we want the average load. So we need to figure out, right? We need to add the 50 and the 10 and put that in the denominator here. So 100 times 50 is 5,000. That's 800 divided by 60. 5,800 divided by 60. And that is 96.67 tons. Okay, that is the weight, right? Unit. So we would say 96.67 tons on average. So basically, tell yourself what are the two that you're multiplying? Well, obviously there are only two options, right? Load and cars. They want the average load, so therefore I need to have the number of cars down here to cancel those out, and then left with the weight. Okay. A couple more questions, and then I'll let you be. Okay. Choose the letter that best completes the statement. Trimming the highest and the lowest values of large data set will cause the median to. Did I do this with you? Or no? I did that, right? So there we go. There's the red line. If this is your data set, the median is in the middle, right? So if you fold this and you remove the highest and the lowest, the median stays the same. It doesn't change, right? Because you've only trimmed on each end, the median stays the median. So C is the answer there. Oh, there's that one. See if you can do that. You should be able to do this one, no problem, right? State 5 whole numbers that meet the criteria using numbers 1 through 9, okay? I'm going to go ahead and make sure my median is set. The mean is 4. I'm going to leave that for now, but my mode is 2. Because median is in the middle and it has to be arranged, that means that the 2 have to be below it, right? To the left, because median tells you that you have the same number of values below and above. So I have 2 2s, so that makes it my mode. And if I want my mean to be 4, I want, how did I explain this to you again? This already adds up to 7. So 4 times 5, right? If my average, I want it to be 4, and there's 5 digits, I need a sum of 20, right? So I need a sum of 20, meaning that this needs to be 13 here. And I can use 9 and 4, right? Or 8 and 5. It's up to you. But it has to be arranged, right? And that will give you the 20. And so now if you add this all up, it will add up to 20. Divide that by 5, you get 4. Okay? Next page. 1 mark only here. The data set represents the kids that visited Maggie's house on Halloween over the past 7 years. Explain why it would be better for Maggie to use the median rather than the mean to predict the number of kids next Halloween. And the reason would be is that this is an outlier, right? If you just calculate the average and you include that outlier, your average will be pulled up and it will be bigger than what it should be, right? She should use the median, comma, because the large outlier will increase the mean. Okay? If you 8, 10, 11, right? 8, 10, 11, 13, 19, 21, 87, right? In this case, this would be your median, right? If you did the average, that would be 18 and 11 plus 13 plus 19 plus 21 plus 87 divided by 7. The mean would be 24.14, right? Approximately 24 kids, right? So this is just to make that point even more obvious that that outlier will bring this up to 24, but really 13 is probably the best bet, right? Based on what's happened before and below, so that's a better preparation. You might disagree, but statistically speaking, that's what you should do. Winnipeg Flyers hockey team keeps stats on the number of goals scored by each player. calculate the Steelers' percentile rank. So percentile rank is B, which is the number of scores below the one you're considering, over total times 100. So I will say B, Steelers, you gotta find Steelers, that's 26. So how many scores are below 26? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 scores. Sorry. 5 scores below 26, right? So that's how you can find your B. And in this case, 2, 4, 6, 8. 8 scores in total. So when you figure that out, you just plug in, right? It's 5 over 8 times 100. So that's 62.5. You can't have that. You will just say either 62 or 63rd percentile. And what does that mean? It means that 63% of players scored less than Steelers. Okay? I'll write that down. Scored less than, you should put down 26 goals, right? Because that's how many goals Steelers score in this particular year. So I want you to understand the difference between percentile rank and actual score on your test. You could score a 90% on your test, but have a 40 percentile, meaning that only 40% of students did worse than you, right? So it tells you where you stand compared to everybody else. And that's it. That's it. That's all. So the pink one here has, right, I encourage you to do the same thing, do geometry as well. I didn't cover a whole lot of geometry today. I didn't do any geometry because I did some of that on Thursday, but I encourage you to do this one. The key is online, and if you want more, there's a blue booklet here. That key I will post in a bit, and just use that to prepare for the cumulative tomorrow. Second period, so that's a nice thing.